So, after the trial had taken place over the course of about a year, the judges finally reached a verdict, okay, for the different defendants. 12 of the defendants were guilty, and they were sentenced to hang. Another 7 were guilty and sentenced to different prison sentences. So some were sentenced to life in prison, some 20 years, and then some as short as 10 years. 3 defendants were acquitted. There wasn't sufficient evidence to prove that they were guilty. And so these are the 3 who were acquitted. You can see them from left to right there, having a smoke after they've been acquitted, and the press is in the background. You can see this gentleman here getting ready to take a picture. And so there's just, that not everybody was found guilty, is my point. This actually outraged the Soviet judges, by the way, who felt that all of the defendants should have been guilty, and the leading Soviet judge at Nuremberg wrote a very lengthy dissent explaining why he thought these 3 should have been guilty as well. Regarding Goering, the Nuremberg trial said in part, quote, Goering was the leading war aggressor, director of the slave labor program, and the creator of the oppressive program against the Jews. All of these crimes he has frankly admitted. His guilt is unique in its enormity. The record discloses no excuses for this man, end quote. So, let me back up just for a second. Goering was sentenced to hang. Before he could be hanged, he was able to take some kind of a cyanide pill, so he was able to commit suicide right before he was supposed to be executed. Why does Nuremberg matter? Why is this the focal point of a chapter in the textbook for this course? Why do I focus so much on it in my own research? There's a few things. It exposed the atrocities that the Nazis had committed against the Jews. It created a documentary record that we can look back at now to see the evidence for the Holocaust. It laid the foundation for the modern international human rights law, and I'll give you an example of that in a second. And it led to the creation of other international criminal trials. So, regarding modern international human rights law, some examples of that. One is what's called the Nuremberg Principles. You can read those online if you want. Here they are in German. I've tried to summarize them as best I can in English. So, individuals can be punished for committing a crime under international law. International law supersedes national law. Heads of state or government officials can be held responsible for a crime under international law. You cannot say you were just following orders. That is not acceptable anymore. An accused person has the right to a fair trial. Crimes against peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity are punishable under international law. And then if you're complicit in any of those crimes above, you will also be charged under international law. So those are the Nuremberg Principles that were adopted as part of the United Nations soon after the Nuremberg trial. This is a little political cartoon that I found years ago. This is from Doonesbury, 2008, where you can see one of the characters is talking about having a guilty conscience. He worked at McFriendly's. He worked at a fast food place, and he served over 3 million calories, but only 800,000 of them were necessary for weight maintenance, which is a lot of excess. But he says, I was just a lowly server. I was just filling orders. And the other person says, but wasn't that the defense at Nuremberg? And he says, no, that was following orders. And she responds, well, then you're good to go, Morley. Whew. So anyway, I like to use that sometimes to explain one of the key takeaways from the Nuremberg trial is that you can't say you were just following orders. This is very controversial, though. I've had students who are veterans or active duty reserves, and they tell me all the time that part of being in the military is being part of a group bigger than yourself, and if a superior gives you an order, then you're supposed to follow it. I have also had other veterans who have told me, well, if you know the order is illegal, then you're not required to follow it. But I just present that as an example, that the Nuremberg principles include, you can't say you're just following orders. That comes out of the Nuremberg trial, and that is supposed to be part of international law to this day. There's something called the Genocide Convention that comes about after the Nuremberg trial, and this is just part of it. So it defined genocide. Genocide is a term originated in 1944. There was a man named Raphael Lemkin who created the word genocide, and he fought hard for a genocide convention to be adopted, and it finally was in 1948. And so this is just defining what genocide is. Killing members of a group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members, inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction, in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. This is sterilization, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. And those were all official parts of what's considered genocide. Another huge example coming out of the Nuremberg trial and how it influenced modern international human rights law, the UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Eleanor Roosevelt was instrumental in getting this passed through the United Nations. Here she is. Obviously, this is a press photo. It's a press op, photo op, because she's holding this gigantic copy of the UDHR in Spanish, no less. But the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, I encourage you to read over it, because it's pretty obvious that there is some influence between what happens at Nuremberg and what comes out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You see human rights adopted in the Constitution of Germany after the war. 1949, the very first article. The German people therefore acknowledge inviolable and inalienable human rights as the basis of every community, of peace and of justice in the world. And so those are all part of Nuremberg's legacy. It also led to other international criminal trials. And so we'll talk about this later in the course. International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the ICTY. Yugoslavia no longer exists. It was made up of smaller countries, which do exist now. Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, Macedonia, Kosovo. You might remember hearing about Kosovo when President Bill Clinton was in office. And then Serbia. Additionally, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, 1994, is also sort of a legal descendant of the Nuremberg trial. And most importantly, the International Criminal Court, which came into force finally in 2002. So almost 60 years after Nuremberg, we finally have a permanent International Criminal Court, and it's the ICC that exists today. ICC is controversial. I just want to show this map as an illustration. All of the green countries here are members of the ICC. They have signed on and they are subject to the ICC's jurisdiction. The red countries have not signed on and have no intentions. I'm sorry, I got cut off. The red countries have not signed on and have no intentions of signing on. So you can see China and India listed there most prominently. The orange countries. The orange countries had expressed interest in joining, but then backed out. So that includes the United States. It includes the Soviet Union. It will soon include the Philippines because they've decided they're going to pull out too more recently. So ICC is controversial, but it is part of Nuremberg's legacy. Nuremberg in 1945, it ended in 1946, and it created this precedent that individuals who commit crimes, heinous crimes under international law, crimes against humanity, genocide, those sorts of things, then they will be punished in an international court. And we finally have a permanent one, the ICC, which is a judicial arm of the United Nations, but the United States is not a member and not subject to its jurisdiction, neither is the Soviet Union. So anyway, just in conclusion, the trial came about because the Allies thought it was the only just option. Nuremberg was the first international criminal trial. And why does it matter? It exposed the atrocities against the Jews, laid the foundation for modern international human rights law, led to other criminal trials. So that is the Nuremberg trial, as briefly as I can describe it in a video. Let me know if you have questions, though. I get very passionate talking about the Nuremberg trial. So if you have questions about any aspect of it, let me know. We have a lot of readings related to the Nuremberg trial in this unit of the course. So I look forward to reading what you have to say online.